are you seeing that? What trends across your clients are you seeing on tips and tip pooling? Any standards across and you guys deal with clients across the country, so
We sure do. Now, California is a massive restaurant market, of course, and so we have quite a few customers out there, including on this call here with us. So I think both of those are actually just about textbook perfect use cases. So different style of restaurants, right? Joseph, more QSR, more counter service on that element with an elevated item. And that's commonly known from our system as either weighted or point systems. But you're using a tip pool, but rather than it being a simple, hey, if you worked 1 hour versus 2 hours, they make twice as much, irrelevant of the position. Where you're going through, and it sounds like Joseph and team has done really well, is say, okay, who has the most impact on the guest? Who's going to be providing the most amount of service? Who is our true sales team? Who's going to lead to these guests coming back? And let's make sure we're fairly compensating that. They may be the ones who have the most training, the most knowledge, but it's a great method, and we highly, highly encourage that. I do think, with David, you have a far more full service restaurant, right? You're able to actually have roles that dictate an impact at different times during the guest experience, whether that's the host now in the tip pool, whether that's a expo that's making sure food gets out on time and accurate. So my biggest advice in the trends that we are commonly seeing is make your tip model work for you, right? Know what your restaurant is, know what the guest experience is when those employees are working it, and figure out who has the most impact on that customer experience. What positions of the staff maybe are at risk of churning over? Where do you see turnover? And so when you see those, is that a model where you can say, hey, if we had a more apt tip description, if we understood exactly what we needed to be competitive at, can we vary that? Joseph, I hear you, AM and PM tip pool. That is a great way to look at it. That service may be different during the weekdays, may be different on the weekends, may require a different amount of staff or personnel on the floor. You definitely want to make sure. And I think, the days of a single, very simple house pool, 7 days a week, one thing, or you're looking at a weekly, largely doesn't work. There are unique scenarios, but to Joseph's point, there is what you're looking for is, let's use a scalpel instead of a hammer. Let's make sure that we're analyzing it regularly as technology in the restaurant changes and it impacts the roles that our employees are performing. We may need to update our tip structure there as well. So really it's making sure it's dialed in for your exact concept and your needs at that time, Anthony.
yeah.
And we've thought about that with our concepts because for a weighted scale, because if we double click on the bussers, we have bussers that it's a 18-year-old kid's first job, and then we have someone who's been with us for a number of years. So, if they were to get just an equal share and the server's like, well, this kid is just out the gates and he doesn't really have the experience of someone who's been doing this for a number of years, and he's a little bit quicker and is a little bit more detail oriented with his work. So we have entertained that as well.
And
So go
Joseph,
ahead.
before the call, you were talking about how you were kind of, I wouldn't say hacking some technology together, but it sounded like you had a contact that knew software and was helping with the technology side of it. But how, yeah, and both to Joseph, we'll start, and David, how has technology helped with this issue? And I mean, I think it's a prime example on good use of technology to take this complicated calculation and almost do it instantaneously, as opposed to have the servers sitting around after their shift counting the money, doing math, and there could be all these errors.
Yeah.
So two-part question, how the technology helped, and then these nuances, between shifts and everything. Is it getting more nuanced like that, or can you overdo it as well and have too many, like, hey, you're working this shift, you're going to get this, and it creates too much disruption within your workforce too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The transparency is definitely there. If you for our servers to be able to kind of I don't know if they obsess about it, but they're looking at all these metrics and they can actually see all these details per check, so that's technology that you're saying, okay, well, that's great information, but it's a lot and it's very useful. But I think it's been a time saver from what you were saying. At the end of their shift, instead of taking 20 minutes to do all these calculations and they're shooting the bull with their coworkers, let's get them off the clock because we're paying a high minimum wage for them, and it has streamlined that process for sure.
Kirk, any comments on that? Any thoughts?
No, I think they're spot on, and you get to see kind of two distinct organizational views and how they've approached it. But I think cash, the cost of cash, is one of the hidden costs that really eat some restaurants alive. We had maybe a 25 location restaurant group who did the math, and they were spending almost $30,000 a month. They're very, very high volume, but between scheduling armored car pickups, making sure the liability of keeping that in a safe, the fact that a lot of hands have to touch that and accounting accordingly. And then, of course, once you hit over a certain volume, cash deposits start costing you money, putting that cash into the bank. And so couldn't agree more. I mean, I think there's always going to be petty cash on hand, right? You're always going to have some level of that. But anything you can do to get that automated, to make sure that that's going to be tracked accordingly, to get that liability off of your hands into a third party, into whatever it may be, is going to really dramatically improve your system. And even with credit card processing fees 2-3%, you're still going to see significant savings, particularly as I think David, you called it, high minimum wage. If each employee is taking 5-10 minutes to get off the clock because they're waiting to clock out, and you have 4 or 5 of those employees every single shift that are taking that, you're right there going to be $15 to $20 per shift extra, just in time that's not spent serving the guests, not spent enhancing, making sales for you, any of that fun stuff that you need.
When I started in the industry, minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. So as operators, I don't think we really turned our heads at that. You're like, oh, that's kind of peanuts. But now when we're looking at 2 employees talking together, we're like, oh, wow, that's a chunk of change standing there. So yeah, definitely important.
Agreed. And it hits California harder, right? When you're in a tip credit state where you can pay $2.13 an hour, I think you go back to that same mindset of, we're talking maybe 10, 15 cents. In California, that is not the case, right? These are real dollars that add up real quickly across multiples. So